Hello and welcome back to the 52nd episode of the Oligarchy Disruptor podcast with your host, Bennett Leon, and we have our lovely co-host, Ashley Downing. Okay, so guys, today we have a really awesome episode lined up for you guys, and this is our first video of the podcast as well. So that's a big advance in the right direction, and I hope you guys connect with it way more in this way and I really like it a lot because it's a more personal way for us to get to know you and for you to get to know us as well and how we think and like what kind of environment we live in, right? So let's go ahead and start it off and jump right into the topic of the day, which is the the fuckery really that goes around in Washington D.C. and everything that's wrong with the current political climate that is in existence and that has been in existence for basically the country's inception. But it's morphed over time. And speaking of that, there are some really influential leaders that have pushed us in the right direction. MLK was one of those leaders. Abraham Lincoln was one of those leaders as well. FDR moved the country in a very positive direction. He was reelected 4 times, the only president to be reelected that many times, and he was the last progressive president that we had. And that was in the he led us out of the Second World War, so that was the 40s. So that's when he died. But an amazing character.
That's so
right?
crazy.
I know. So, but we're gonna start off with a video by MLK, one of those super influential leaders that everyone talks about now and talks really highly of. But this dude was literally number 1 on FBI's wanted list. He had many enemies in Washington, many segregationists that were a part of that as well. So let's go ahead and play this video. I'm going to share my screen for you guys so you can check it out. So here we go. All right. So hope you enjoy.
It is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages. Racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. There's nothing new about poverty. What is new is that we now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty. The real question is whether we have the will. We spend $322,000 for each enemy we kill in Vietnam, while we spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor.
I love that quote there at the end.
I know. I love that quote as well. And that's actually like a huge thing for this podcast that I would love to talk about, actually. So, God, I suck at this. What is it? Not stop. Okay. Wow. Literally went away like 3 times. But the quote is, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor." And that is tried and true. Of course, MLK was out there in the 60s talking about all these really crazy things that were going on back then. All the injustices that were happening to people just based on the color of their skin rather than the content of their character, like he famously said in his speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
But any thoughts on like how that has kind of progressed since then, and how MLK, even though he was, of course, like a man that was very popular in the 60s, helped lead the the civil rights movement to where it is today, really. Um, like, and his influence on society. How how right is he about the things that were happening then, and like how reminiscent of are those things to like what's happening now?
Yeah, so not much has changed, right? And I think that it's really important to note uh, his legacy and how many people hated him in that moment. And I mean, he was assassinated. So, and Abraham Lincoln, which we also mentioned earlier, a lot of people hated him. He was assassinated. Um, Regularly, we've had these progressive leaders who are persecuted for these kinds of radical ideas. And you hear this now with Bernie Sanders, everybody saying that, you know, his ideas are too radical, that America's not ready for Medicare for all, or for, you know, all these socialism, quote unquote, policies that that a lot of progressives are on board with. Um, and history has shown that these ideas are not radical. These are ideas that have been around
Mm-hmm.
for so long, and people have been striving for decades. Um, but we continue to live in this two-party system where neither party is the Democratic Party has not been on board with progressive ideals and progressive policies, and they're constantly snuffing out those people who do actually break into the party and want to these progressive policies. We saw it in 2016. We saw it again in 2020 with Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I like what he said at the beginning about needing a political and an economic shift in this country. That's something we needed then, and that's something that we need now.
Mm-hmm. And it's extremely interesting to note that like the amount of inequalities that existed then are even worse now. And nothing has highlighted this more than the coronavirus crisis that we are seeing now with the uh, with Washington's response to this, and looking at who they're really serving with this. And it's really telling that when they passed that bill, the stimulus bill that's now a law, and it was of course passed and signed by President Trump. What that bill really does for Americans, and really what does it do for you? Yes, you get, most Americans do get $1,200, and then you get a $500 credit if you have a kid, right, or a dependent, right? But like, how much does that really help you? And it's supposed, like, Steve Mnuchin, which is the secretary of the Treasury under President Trump, which is the one that's really like helping move this along and help make the deals to get this done. He thinks that $1,200 is enough liquidity for you and your family to last 10 weeks. That's been documented, tried and true. Like, you can look that up on YouTube. Like, that's fucked up. Like that, and that's obviously disconnected. Like, and that's what you see over and over and over again in Washington. Like, not only are these people disconnected, they have no idea. Like, when I remember watching them in front of like the Facebook CEO and anything to do with like technology, these people were asking absolutely ridiculous questions. And that's what you see on like a really outdated, bureaucratic type government, in which these people are only here because they serve special interests, and for that purpose they are reelected at an alarming rate of over 90%, even though Congress has for decades and decades not um, not have the approval of the majority of Americans when it comes
Yeah.
to issue after issue. And it's extremely telling that no matter how much Americans want gun rights or better healthcare, in the case of like Medicare for all or universal healthcare or anything like that, even though they want these common sense things to happen, it's very telling that our government doesn't do these things. you know?
Yeah.
Like, as much as we want them, as much as we push them, as much as they're common sense to us, they don't understand that, and they're not pushing for that, and that's telling. That's extremely telling.
Well, and I think that what it comes down to, and we say this a lot, is we're given this illusion of choice. We're given this idea that because you are able to vote for these officials and the president of the United States,
Mm-hmm.
that you have this option of who the next leader of the country is going to be, when in actuality, and we can see this because from MLK on, even before, people have wanted progressive policies. They've wanted progressives in government, and it has not happened. Decade after decade after decade, presidential nomination after presidential nomination. So we're given this illusion that we have an option, and that this if we can just align ourselves with one of these parties, these people have your best interests at heart. And we're regularly proven wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we keep voting for these two different parties? Why do we allow our government to tell us who to vote for? Because that's really what it comes down to. Especially, and we talked about this after Super Tuesday, and or we just talked about Super Tuesday a couple episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
The person who has won all of those states has never lost the presidential nomination.
Mm-hmm.
So come on, I mean, you've got to, where is your head if you think that this is that you had a choice? Where is your head? We don't have a choice. Our choice is to either
This was the last drop
suck it up
me.
and get on board, or to decide that you're not going to allow them to let you to tell you who to vote for.
I feel like 2020 was the last job for me. Like, this
Me
is
too.
only my second presidential election that I participated in, and this is not what I wanted. I did not sign up to be a Democrat and to participate in the primary process and the election process just for my voice to get snuffed out by a bunch of bureaucratic fucks that only serve the oligarchs and maintain the power that and the oppression that's been going rampant throughout American history, throughout literally its entire lifetime. So,
well, exactly. And I think that people have constantly said to me, and it's honestly been a really big decision not voting for Biden, because, getting Trump out of office is a really big deal. This is what we really
huge.
want.
Mm-hmm.
And so why not just come together with the opposition, vote Biden, get him out of the seat? Because I just feel like, and MLK's quote goes perfectly with this, we need a political shift in this country, and it's not happening by voting with your party. It's not happening. We're constantly going back to that party's normal, instead of moving forward. So yeah, I'm with you. Unfortunately, I think I've hashtag them exited.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't continue with a good conscience, a clear conscience, keep voting for a system that keeps suppressing my vote and keeps suppressing the vote of so many like-minded people when it comes to just having a better country, a more functioning country. Like that's what's common sense to us is not common sense to them, and they will push it out and they will snuff it out. That's what Nancy Pelosi will do. As much as you want to like her, as much as she's likable and you want to call her Mama Bear of the House,
She's just part of the establishment.
Exactly, and she is working against you constantly. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, is working against you. Barack Obama, as much as you like him, I'm sorry to bring him up. I know he's the first Black president. I liked him too. I promise, guys. Like I drank the tea. I very much drank the tea. I loved Obama. I loved his family, scandal-free, right? He seemed to like kind of take us out of that whole like recession that went on in 2008. Seemed like a great president, but really, guys, after learning all these facts about him over some time, you realize that he was just a pretty smile, but really stabbing everybody else in the back at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and that's the kind of president that he was, and he does it very well. Like, he is still extremely liked, and to the point where on Super Tuesday you saw the influence that he had, and there was articles written about how maybe this might be Bernie Sanders' party after his performance, uh, after the first few primaries and caucuses of this primary process. But really, the entire time, it never was.
Yeah.
Whose party is the Democratic Party? It's Barack Obama's. It's still his party, and you can see that tried and true once again. Like I said on Super Tuesday, when he asked those candidates that were still in the race up until Super Tuesday
Exactly what I
to
was going
drop
to
out,
say.
and you can see that in an article by Politico that came out very recently. I believe the title was Barack Obama wins the primaries. And his staff is documented and as talking about all these things. Like, I'm not, you might say I'm a hater, you might say like I'm crazy, like I'm a conspiracy theorist, whatever the fuck you want to say, but this
It
shit's
happened.
real. This
Mm-hmm.
shit's real, you know? And
Yeah.
if you're choosing to ignore it, then you're part of the problem. I'm sorry to say it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's so funny that you mentioned that you drank the tea, because I remember when we first met, I thought that Obama was the bee's knees. I loved him. I
We're
remember
from
my
Chicago, for God's sake. We're from
Yeah.
Chicago. Like, you can't live here and not like him.
I remember like my favorite Apple meme was Obama dancing on pizza. Like, I really thought that he was great. But the more that you learn about not just him, but other candidates, or even just nominee presidential nominees, you kind of really get a sense for, and you learn who contributed to their campaigns. You really start to get an idea of who they really are, and who they really support. And a statement that I always remember from my U.S. Congress class is, "You dance with that which brung you."
Mhm.
And when you see the people who are contributing to their campaigns, and you see the people who are the lobbyists that are behind them, it paints a very clear picture of how they're going to make decisions when they are in office.
So let's talk about how the two-part duopoly, how it literally creates the same effect, and there really is no change. It doesn't matter who's in the White House, whether it's a Democrat or whether it's a Republican. It doesn't matter whether the Republicans are in charge of the entire Congress or whether they're not, or half of it or not. It's literally the same outcome. You can see this in many cases. You can see this even with Obamacare's signature, like his legacy really is Obamacare, right? But who is he competing against in 2012? Mitt Romney, right? And Romney
Romney Care
actually created Romney Care, which Obama based Obamacare on. You know? So
Yeah.
it would have been the same outcome. These people are doing the same things over and over again. You're seeing Trump actually doing a better job with this depression or recession, whatever you want to call it, compared to Barack Obama. Actually, Trump obviously gave away a shit ton of money, and so did Congress, to special interests, to the corporations, to big banks, you name it. But they're also giving money this time, at least to people, and they're at least somewhat, the states are kind of stepping in and doing moratoriums on rent and mortgage, things like that, IRS payments. Like they're somewhat trying to help, and implementing UBI in somewhat like a one-time cash payment of $1,200 dollars is really only a band-aid, you know?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
but at least they're doing something. Obama didn't do shit for anybody in 2008. He let he let 5.2 million people get kicked out of their houses.
Yeah.
He let the banks take people's money after that. He didn't. He just gave away, I believe it was $800 billion without any help for anybody else other than the biggest banks on Wall Street.
Yeah.
So like this is
Yeah,
the same outcome.
definitely.
You know, like Donald Trump's doing the same thing. Obama's doing the same thing. Like,
Well, exactly. And
why
that's
vote
what
for
what
this?
I
Why are you guys voting for this?
and that's exactly what I mean why when I say, each party has their normal, and when you vote for that party, you're just bringing things back to their normal. And one thing that I hear a lot from people, this voting cycle is, well, let's just get things back to how they were with Obama, like that, like let's just get things back to how they used to be. We might not get a lot of progression, but at least we can get back to before Trump. And I have to say, our economy is doing well under Trump. How maybe social programs, definitely those have been cut. Unemployment rate, it's actually really, really tricky when you look at that. I don't really think it's actually that much better. But there's not really much sense in going back to where we were with Obama. I think people think that Trump is this horrible, horrible person that did all these horrible things. And granted, he's not the best president. I would give you that. I do not want him in office another 4 years. However, I don't think that by going back to the Obama era, that's going to save us.
Absolutely not. That's Obama only made it seem like it was a good time. It was once again an illusion. Like I said, that's why I love saying that about him, because he really was just a pretty face. The dude also was known as the deporter in chief. Deported over 3 million people when he overwhelmingly got the Latino vote in 2008 and in 2012. These are Democrats that are doing this. These are not Republicans. Borderline Republicans, maybe, but they have a D. They have a D in front of their names.
Uh-oh. I think
So
I
let's.
think that they have a good I think they have good in their they have good intentions, Bennett.
So, to a certain extent, I feel like, to a certain extent, because I feel like at the same time they're not stupid, and they do those things purposefully. Even Barack Obama, I'm going to bring up Barack Obama again because this was reminiscent, and like I'm conscious, like I was kind of conscious during Barack Obama's tenure as president, and I'm kind of comparing him against Donald Trump a little bit in this way. Of course, because Donald Trump is complete shit when it comes to the environment, but I'm going to bring up Obama because everybody likes to think that he's a saint. When the Keystone XL pipeline was going to go through, or I believe it was DAPL actually, the Dakota Access Pipeline, the one where the water protectors kind of came out and like those tribes were all like assembled.
Yes. Yeah.
In Dakota over there.
Yeah, I actually knew people who went there.
And like that was a really noble movement, right? Like they were protecting their water. There was like a sacred place for them. Like you already fucked them over and over again over the years. Like why take this away from them too? But it's in the name of profits, oil, making deals. Washington is all over this as well.
The lobbyists.
As that, yeah, Washington once again. So
who do you think voted them in?
But the
can't vote
point
against
I'm bringing into this, why I'm bringing that up is because Barack Obama took a very long time for him to do anything about that. And he eventually stopped it. Trump resumed it as soon as he became president. But what was notable is how long it took for Obama and how much pressure it took from so many different people in so many different ways. And the images of those people getting doused with pepper spray or like smoke or like getting beaten and stuff. People were like, famous people were going out there and getting arrested. Shailene Woodley got arrested out there protesting. I know people myself that went out there and got arrested. So it's very telling once again that neither party is on your side. Neither party is on your side at any point. And that's why this needs to change. You know, this whole system, this whole notion that I'm going to vote blue no matter who, I'm going to vote the safe vote, even though it's going to like push it in the right direction. Like, no, you shouldn't be voting for incrementalism. Incrementalism is a losing strategy. You need to go all in or nothing, just like the Republicans did. That's why they won, because they demanded a different America. A certain, even though they were a small amount of them,
Yeah.
the Tea Party completely took over the Republican Party, and that's what the progressives have been trying and failing over and over and over again to do. Why? Because we keep voting blue no matter who, and voting these neoliberals at the power that keep suppressing the progressive vote and the progressive agenda when it comes to, and it's not even the progressive agenda, it's the working people's agenda. This is the majority of America. We keep calling
The
it
average
progressivism,
American.
but this is in the interest, these policies are in the best interest of the majority of Americans, the majority of the workers in this country. So the plight, our plight, the progressive plight, workers' plight, it's all one and the same.
At least it should be.
But this system is a cycle, and we need to break out of it. And our voting is literally the only thing we have, the only power we have over Washington and the people that we elect over there. It's because we elect them, and that's a power that was vested in us once again by the founding fathers. They wanted us to have that. Why? Because we hold the influence over Washington in that case. They would be scared of us. They would have to listen to us in that case. And they wouldn't have to deal with the kind of tyranny that they dealt with in Britain, in the UK, and Europe.
Well, and I like to think of it as, if enough, and especially because Democrats are making such a big, which it is, you know, this is a big election year for Democrats to try to get Trump out of the White House. But I think that if they notice that a lot of people do not vote Democrat, I mean, that's the only way that they can see, whoa, maybe we are not aligning ourselves with the majority of Americans, which we are supposed to be trying to do.
So
if we feed into that duopoly. Oh boy, Bennett.
So what should people do, Ashley?
I have always been a third partier. I think that that's a good option. The only reason why I waver in saying that is because I don't think that now is a time where a third party can actually win. I just want to have some sort of protest, so I don't want to vote Democrat. But I am typically a third partier, so I would say vote third party. I know some people who are going to write in Bernie Sanders on the Democratic ballot. I'm not against that. I think that might be a good idea. I'm still debating how much I like Bernie for endorsing Biden and succumbing to the Democratic establishment. So I'm not sure if I feel like I want to jot his name in there, but
they're gonna blame you. But I'm gonna do that. That's gonna be my personal choice. I'm going to write in Bernie Sanders for the sole purpose of wanting to make the message heard that this progressive candidate, the leader of our movement up until this point, someone that I don't believe is the right leader, but nonetheless is for at least for the time being of the progressive movement in the United States. Bernie Sanders deserves, this was his time to shine. He was going to win. I had $5,000 on him winning this primary season because I was that confident in his ability to be able to do so. And he proved me right over and over again in the beginning, but I did not count on the level of corruption that we saw displayed on Super Tuesday in the democratic process. So that was very unfortunate for us to experience once again, but that's why I'm going to demag it. And that's, I'm assuming, the same reason why you are too. It's because the party is not in support of our plight. They're not in support of the issue. They don't care about us in reality. They care about just maintaining the status quo, keeping their donors happy, keeping the system intact, and keeping the profits steadily going to the top 1%, the oligarchs. which is why this podcast
Exactly.
exists, because we need to talk
To
about the
disrupt
things.
that oligarchy.
We need to talk about the things that the majority of the media does not talk about, that most people don't talk about, because this is the real side of politics that most people aren't aware of. And that's why
Yeah.
they believe the things that they believe, is because they are misled, they are misguided, they are consuming the wrong information that's pointing them in the wrong direction,
Yeah.
or they're
And I
listening
think
to the wrong people, you know?
definitely. And I think that people need to realize that their vote holds a lot of power, a lot of power. And that's not something that I am willing to give up to the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. So I think this is a great place to wrap up this episode. So once again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to our first
Yes, thank
video.
you.
This is super important to us. We cannot wait to keep doing this content for you guys. Let us know in the comments below if you found this interesting, what you thought, what your thoughts are of this, who's right, who's wrong, who has a what you didn't know, what you learned, or whatnot. So once again,
What you
please,
disagreed with.
yeah. So guys, once again, thanks for listening and watching. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
See you later. Oh, shit.